What are Classy Neuvillette's biggest pros and cons? That's what I'm here to tell you today. My name is Juice, and let's get into it. I think one of the most notable things about this character in the current day is the fact that he has an absurd amount of teams. Like, I'll say this, he isn't the best DPS in the game anymore, he hasn't been for a long time, and he definitely has passed his days as being the top prime DPS. But I feel like one of the main things that still sets him apart and makes him unique these days is the fact that he has so many freaking teams. It felt like every other patch, every new character that was coming out had some kind of synergy with this guy. It's kind of insane. It's like anytime Hoyoverse makes a new support, Neuvillette is able to use that support, and bam, he gets a new team. Now, I will say, most of the time you pretty much are just going to be using Neuvillette, Lady Furina, Shilonen, and Kazuha. That is pretty much going to be the classic standard hyper team that you're going to be running with him. However, he has so many good, viable team options, it's nuts, and there is a very, very high chance that literally no matter who you have on your account, you're able to build some kind of team with him. It literally doesn't matter what roster of supports you have, you get this guy, congratulations, you probably have a functioning Neuvillette team. Somehow, somewhere, somehow, whatever, Hoyoverse gave this guy a million teammates. I thought Hoyoverse just really favored this guy or something like that. I mean, he's even getting a skin this patch. So all around, whatever you have, you're gonna be able to use him. You're gonna be able to. Whether it's classic Lady Furina hyper teams, Escoffier Hydro Cryo Freeze teams, Lauma teams, Inefa teams, literally whatever it is, you're going to be able to use this guy. I would also say that makes him an excellent character for beginners, because you're going to be able to set up a team for him pretty quickly. Something like Neuvillette, Fischl, Kachina, Sucrose is going to work just fine. And it's honestly pretty easy to upgrade from there. So not only are his teams endless, but he's also pretty accessible for beginners. And that's another thing I want to mention, he's quite free to play accessible in that regard. You're able to stick him on Prototype Amber and he's still going to perform pretty decently. Now I will say he is not exactly a top tier damage dealer anymore, but he's far from a bad DPS and he still does pretty decently on Prototype Amber. You're still definitely going to be able to get through most content, and considering how flexible he is in terms of team building, you end up being left with a lot of freedom and you can decide yourself what kind of Neuvillette teams you want to build, because he has a lot of good ones. And another thing that I should mention is that his gameplay is very straightforward, like very straightforward. It's very hard to mess up Neuvillette gameplay, to be honest. So once again, that contributes to him being good for beginners, and he just generally ends up being very easy to pick up. And another thing I want to say is that even though he's a really old character at this point, well, okay, not really old, but old enough. He came out in Fontaine 4.1, he's been out for over 2 years now. I would say he's still solid. He genuinely held up quite well in my opinion. He was the best DPS in the game for a very long time, and even though I wouldn't say that's the case anymore, he still gets enough good teams these days to still be a competitive unit. He still feels good to play, and I would say he has generally aged pretty well and stood the test of time. I wouldn't say, once again, that he is the best anymore. And I feel like as time goes on, we're only going to continue to get stronger and stronger DPSs as days go on. However, Neuvillette's current modern teams are still very solid, and he still remains as honestly a pretty decent pull. I will say he is not some kind of must-pull character, and if you already have a pretty comfortable roster of DPSs on your account, and you already feel like your teams are pretty well stacked, then perhaps you don't really need him, but he is still a pretty decent investment, and if you pull for him, you are still going to be able to find a use for him. So I'll say this, even if he's not the best anymore, he is still a very safe pull to make, because he very often acquires new teammates because he naturally synergizes with so many characters. So you can't really go wrong pulling for him. I don't want to say that he is necessarily some crazy, amazing investment that you can make these days, because we do just have better now. But to say that he's fallen off super drastically and he is just completely not worth it anymore would be wrong, because he's honestly still pretty good, and he honestly still has pretty good teams. So if you want to invest into him, he's still not really a bad choice. And I'd say you can pull for him without any reservations about whether he's going to become really bad or not. He's already been power crept by other DPSs by quite a wide margin, so if that's what you're worried about, then there are more meta DPSs you can go for now, but he's still good. And if you like his quality of getting new teammates quite consistently, and just generally being quite versatile in that sense while still being a good unit, then I think Neuvillette could be the character for you. And another thing that I should mention is that his C1 is quite nice, because if you repeat an element in his teams, like using Lady Furina with him, then you're still able to make the most out of his A1 passive. I will say it is more worth getting constellations on modern DPSs now, especially because C1s on modern characters are genuinely nuts these days, But if you really like Neuvillette and you want the extra boost, then yes, going for his C1 is not a bad decision necessarily. However, we do need to talk about his flaw, because unfortunately, this character is definitely not what he used to be. I should say something real quick. I am not trying to say Neuvillette is entirely a bad unit, or that he has no redeeming qualities anymore, because, well, I literally just spent the past 5 minutes talking about his redeeming qualities. But he is far from the best DPS in the game, and he hasn't been for a very long time. I mean, Moika definitely solidified that grave, that was for sure, but ever since then I would say that he has only continuously continued to be power crept by new DPSs, because the standard of DPSing these days is just higher than what it used to be. Now, damage isn't everything, and I would say that in this current meta where teams are becoming more rigid than before, being a unit that is able to use lots of teams and lots of teams well, because that is something I personally value. I don't think there's any point in having a ton of teams if you're not good in a lot of teams, but if you're able to use a lot of teams well and not be restricted to specific characters, that can be very appealing in a meta where characters are asking for more specific teammates. Obviously, I act like there's been some insane shift. There are still characters that are very budget-friendly. For example, upcoming Zi Bai, in my opinion, is a very budget-friendly character who is easily able to have very good performance on a 4-star team, and characters like Duran still come out. He is a very good pyro support in general, and he's also really good for Hex and Circle teams. However, there are still more characters than before, like Skirk and Nafer and Flynn's, that do prefer having a specific 5-star. I will say Flynn's definitely doesn't have the issue as much. He's honestly pretty good without an FA, but the other two, yeah, you can really tell that their performance is just not the same if they don't have their respective 5-star support. So in that sense, Neuvillette is still very appealing. And another thing is that if you don't have a Hydro DPS yet, Neuvillette can sort that out for you if you're just not really into Mualani's playstyle or if you're not interested in DPS Columbina. He still definitely has a lot of reasons to pull for him, but if the main reason you would go for him is meta, I will say the current Lunar teams are just stronger. He is going to be running alongside Zi Bai, a character I personally think is very strong and very worth your investment, that is overall a full package deal. That unit is also very free to play accessible, also is able to use super cheap teammates and perform very well, and is also able to use an extremely budget-friendly weapon, and she is going to perform a lot better than Neuvillette, because that is my point. We just have better DPSs now, and if you're looking for a good budget-friendly DPS, honestly just go for Zi Bai instead, who's going to be running alongside him, unless you're really desperate to get a good Hydro character, in which case, yes, Neuvillette is still going to be worth it. But if you already have that covered, I would honestly just go for Zi Bai instead. Now, if you just prefer Neuvillette and you love him as a character, he is still good and he is still not a bad unit by any means, but he's not some top tier behemoth like he used to be. I just feel like if he's running next to Zi Bai, who is also going to be a very budget-friendly character that's also going to be very good for beginners, then I would honestly just rather go for her instead. But if you're more interested in Neuvillette, he is still good and he still has his reasons to get him. But I do think it's worth highlighting that because one of his main selling points before was just how good he was and how much damage he used to deal, he is not that guy anymore, and while he is still good, and he is still definitely a competent unit, most of the Fontaine DPSs are in this position where they're still good, competent units. They're just not exactly the cream of the crop like they used to be anymore. He is not the best, and I would only get him at this point if you have a specific reason to get him, or if you just really, really like him, or if you're interested in the fact that he's not really restricted to specific teammates. His final flaw is just his usual C0 issues. He does not take full advantage of his A1 pass Draconic Glory stacks if you use Lady Farina in a team with him. The guy was once a Celestia killer in my opinion, but at this point, I would say not as much. He's still good. He is still a good character, but I wouldn't really call him a Celestia killer like I did before. I used to think this was that guy before, because he genuinely was for a long time. But at this point, not really. The Lunar DPSs have just taken over the meta. They are extremely strong, and the top tier Natlan DPSs are also really impressive. Moika and Varessa are still very good characters. Skirk is also a really good DPS still. So all around, I do think you have better options, and if you want a budget-friendly DPS, it's just an unfortunate time for him to rerun, because he is rerunning with the only Lunar DPS that doesn't really need some specific 5-star in order to perform really well. After all, Zi Bai likes playing with Aluga, who is going to be on her banner, so if all you're looking for is meta, I would say Zi Bai is better. But with that being said, Neuvillette has his reasons to get him, and even if he is not the complete be-all end-all of meta anymore, he is still a good character and I can understand going for him. Also, even if he is not as crazy as he used to be, I will always appreciate that time where he was that guy, and I will always appreciate this character in general. I have good memories with him. Hopefully this video is able to tell you Neuvillette's biggest pros and cons. This has been Juice, signing out, and no matter how old this character gets, settle down is always going to be etched into my memory.